The 2005 supernatural action thriller Constantine brought together a distinctive and diverse ensemble of actors, many of whom were already established in Hollywood or on the rise to prominence. This blend of talent helped give the film a unique character and gravitas, elevating its themes of damnation, redemption, and the battle between good and evil beyond conventional genre boundaries. The performances contributed significantly to the film's enduring cult following, and for several cast members, Constantine marked a notable pivot or reinforcement in their careers. At the center of the film is Keanu Reeves, who portrays John Constantine, a cynical occult detective and exorcist condemned to hell due to a past suicide attempt. By 2005, Reeves was already a globally recognized actor, best known for his iconic role as Neo in the Matrix trilogy. That trilogy had concluded just 2 years before Constantine, solidifying Reeves' reputation as a leading man in science fiction and action cinema. Reeves' casting as Constantine was met with both enthusiasm and skepticism at the time. Fans of the original Hellblazer comics, on which the film is loosely based, noted that the comic book version of Constantine was a blonde, British anti-hero more akin to Sting than to Reeves' stoic American demeanor. However, Reeves brought a unique presence to the role, a subdued, world-weary, and internalized performance that captured Constantine's deep guilt, spiritual torment, and defiance in the face of cosmic forces. This performance aligned with Reeves' strength in portraying characters who are both emotionally reserved and philosophically complex. Constantine extended his range beyond the Matrix, showing his ability to carry a darker, more metaphysical narrative. Though it did not earn him major awards, the role contributed to Reeves' continued appeal as an actor with a unique ability to bridge action and introspection. It also foreshadowed his later success with the John Wick series, which similarly featured a morally ambiguous protagonist navigating a mythic underworld. Rachel Weisz played a dual role in the film as Angela Dodson, an LAPD detective investigating her sister's mysterious death, and Isabel Dodson, the sister herself, who dies under unexplained circumstances. Weisz was already gaining attention for her performances in the Mummy series and had proven herself in both action-adventure and dramatic roles. In Constantine, she brought emotional depth and vulnerability to Angela, grounding the supernatural elements of the story with a human connection. Her chemistry with Reeves gave the film a subtle emotional arc that avoided overt romance but hinted at deep empathy and spiritual resonance. The film arrived just before her critically acclaimed performance in The Constant Gardener, for which she won an Academy Award. Constantine thus represents an interesting transitional moment in her career, where she was simultaneously engaging with genre cinema while stepping into more serious dramatic roles. Her ability to move between blockbuster and prestige projects is evident here. Tilda Swinton took on the role of Gabriel, the androgynous archangel whose interpretation in the film departs from traditional angelic depictions. Swinton's Gabriel is manipulative, arrogant, and coldly theological, and her performance walks a fine line between divine detachment and personal obsession. Already known for her roles in art house and independent cinema, Swinton brought an ethereal and otherworldly energy to Gabriel. Her casting was unconventional, and her portrayal helped redefine how celestial beings could be depicted in modern film, not as purely benevolent or wrathful, but as morally complex agents with their own agendas. Constantine showcased Swinton's ability to subvert expectations and embody non-human characters with unsettling credibility. This role helped further cement her reputation as one of the most versatile and intellectually fearless actors in contemporary cinema, paving the way for later genre-bending roles, including her work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe and various avant-garde projects. Jimin Hoon-soo appeared as Papa Midnight, a former witch doctor turned neutral club owner who presides over a spiritual halfway house between heaven and hell. Hoon-soo brought both gravitas and charisma to the role, imbuing Papa Midnight with a sense of wisdom, power, and restraint. Prior to Constantine, Hoon-soo had already earned critical acclaim for his performances in Amistad and in America, and was often cast in roles that required emotional intensity and moral strength. In Constantine, he delivered a more enigmatic performance, suggesting hidden depths and ambiguous loyalties. His character added richness to the film's depiction of a supernatural underworld populated by morally gray figures. Though Papa Midnight was a supporting character, Khunsu's performance left a lasting impression, leading to discussions about potential spin-offs and reinforcing his presence in genre films. It demonstrated his capacity to command the screen even in limited scenes, a quality that would be utilized in later appearances in franchises like Guardians of the Galaxy and Shazam. Shia LaBeouf played Chaz Kramer, Constantine's young apprentice and cab driver, who dreams of being more than a sidekick. At the time, LaBeouf was transitioning from child star to adult actor, having gained fame through Disney's Even Stevens and The Film Holes. Constantine provided him with an early opportunity to perform alongside seasoned actors in a more mature role. His portrayal of Chaz mixed comic relief with youthful earnestness and a desire for validation. While the character's arc was relatively simple, LaBeouf's performance injected energy into the film and hinted at deeper layers of loyalty and sacrifice. This role marked one of the stepping stones toward LaBeouf's breakout in the Transformers franchise, which would begin 2 years later. It also showed early signs of his potential for emotionally driven performances, which he would explore in more serious roles later in his career. Gavin Rossdale, known primarily as the lead singer of the band Bush, made a notable appearance as Balthazar, a suave and malevolent half-demon who torments Constantine. Though not a trained actor at the time, Rossdale's rock star persona translated effectively into the role of a seductive antagonist. His performance was praised for its style and menace, proving that he could hold his own against more experienced co-stars. While Rossdale did not go on to become a major acting figure, his role in Constantine remains a memorable part of the film's unique aesthetic and casting choices. Peter Stormare played Lucifer Morningstar in a brief, but unforgettable scene near the film's climax. Known for his eccentric and often unsettling characters in films like Fargo and Armageddon, Stormare brought a disturbingly playful malevolence to his version of the devil. Dressed in a white suit with tar-stained feet, his Lucifer was unpredictable, mocking, and oddly human. Stormare's portrayal has been widely praised as one of the most original cinematic depictions of the devil, standing out even among a film filled with strong performances. Though his screen time was limited, his impact was enormous, and it remains one of the most quoted and referenced parts of the movie. When Constantine was released in 2005, it entered a cinematic landscape that was still evolving in its approach to comic book adaptations, supernatural thrillers, and religiously charged storytelling. While it was not a massive box office juggernaut, nor a critical darling upon release, the film has steadily grown in cultural stature over the years. Its unique blend of religious horror, noir aesthetics, and philosophical exploration of heaven and hell helped it carve out a niche audience. Over time, Constantine became a cult classic, appreciated not only for its visual style and performances, but also for the way it brought complex spiritual and metaphysical questions into the mainstream. One of the most notable aspects of Constantine's cultural impact lies in its contribution to the broader evolution of comic book films. At the time, the superhero genre was still in its early 2000s form, dominated by the likes of Spider-Man and X-Men. These films leaned heavily into traditional hero narratives, often with bright tones and clear moral boundaries. Constantine, by contrast, offered something darker, more introspective, and morally ambiguous. The title character was not a heroic figure in the traditional sense. He was a chain-smoking, suicidal, embittered man trying to buy his way into heaven through exorcisms and reluctant good deeds. This was a significant departure from the clear-cut morality seen in other comic book adaptations of the time. Constantine paved the way for future adaptations that embraced flawed antiheroes and darker themes, such as Logan, Watchmen, and the Netflix Marvel shows like Daredevil and Jessica Jones. Another key cultural dimension of Constantine is its handling of spiritual and religious subject matter. Few mainstream Hollywood films of the 2000s approached Christian iconography and metaphysical themes as directly as Constantine did. The film's depiction of angels, demons, heaven, hell, and divine judgment was unapologetically theological, yet also radically stylized and personalized. It approached religion not as a system of belief, but as a battleground for cosmic bureaucracy, corruption, and personal salvation. This struck a chord with viewers who were interested in spiritual themes but disillusioned by organized religion. The film's version of Catholic guilt, divine politics, and spiritual warfare resonated with those looking for a narrative that took the soul's struggle seriously without becoming preachy or didactic. Constantine's portrayal of the afterlife as both terrifying and indifferent tapped into broader cultural anxieties of the early 21st century: uncertainty, moral ambiguity, and a sense that larger systems, even divine ones, were indifferent to human suffering. In this way, Constantine mirrored some of the post-9/11 cultural psyche. Released just a few years after the September 11th attacks, the Iraq War, and a rising tide of global instability, the film's themes of eternal conflict, unseen battles, and a man trying to impose meaning on a chaotic world aligned with the emotional undercurrents of the time. Constantine's world was one where innocence didn't guarantee protection and moral certainties were rare. The idea that neither heaven nor hell could be entirely trusted reflected a cultural moment where institutions, religious, political, and otherwise, were under intense scrutiny. The film's setting, a noir-infused version of Los Angeles drenched in rain and shadow, served as a metaphor for moral decay and existential dread. The production of Constantine was a journey marked by creative tension, ambitious visual storytelling, and a series of calculated risks that shaped the final tone and identity of the film. While it is often remembered for its stylistic atmosphere and metaphysical themes, the behind-the-scenes process reveals a complex web of artistic decisions, logistical challenges, and passionate debate about how to adapt the Hellblazer comics for a mainstream audience. The stories from the set not only illuminate the film's final form but also demonstrate how it straddled the line between commercial genre filmmaking and more thoughtful, symbolic storytelling. The film was directed by Francis Lawrence in his feature directorial debut. Prior to Constantine, Lawrence was best known for directing music videos for high-profile artists such as Britney Spears, Janet Jackson, Jennifer Lopez, and Aerosmith. His background in visually stylized short-form storytelling translated well to the film's moody aesthetic and deliberate pacing. The studio took a risk hiring a first-time director for a high-budget film, but Lawrence quickly proved adept at balancing the film's gritty realism with supernatural spectacle. His instincts leaned toward dark, atmospheric visuals and emotionally reserved characters, which matched well with the script's tone. Lawrence's command of visual composition, combined with his willingness to collaborate closely with the cast and production crew, allowed Constantine to avoid many of the pitfalls associated with comic book adaptations of that era. The film was shot primarily in Los Angeles, which doubled as a neo-noir version of itself, a decaying, shadowy city where heaven and hell wage war in secret. Unlike many urban fantasy films that opt for stylized or gothic settings, Constantine grounded its otherworldly elements in familiar environments. Real locations were used wherever possible to maintain a sense of realism. The location scouts found and utilized underground passageways, crumbling churches, and bleak alleyways to reflect Constantine's journey through moral and spiritual decay. One notable location was the Angelus Abbey Mausoleum, which served as the final resting place of Isabel Dodson and played a key role in several pivotal scenes. The crew transformed these everyday places with moody lighting, practical effects, and subtle digital enhancements to suggest the presence of the supernatural without relying too heavily on overt fantasy imagery. One of the more challenging aspects of production was adapting the Hellblazer comic to a cinematic format. The comic, originally created by Alan Moore, Steve Bissette, and John Totleben and later developed into its own series by Jamie Delano and Garth Ennis, was known for its British setting, political subtext, and philosophical depth. The decision to relocate the story from London to Los Angeles and cast Keanu Reeves as an American version of John Constantine was controversial among comic book fans. Screenwriters Kevin Broadbent and Frank A. Capello were tasked with crafting a screenplay that could capture the essence of Constantine's character while making the story accessible to audiences unfamiliar with the comics. This required some compromise. While much of the character's Catholic guilt, cynicism, and knowledge of the occult remained intact, other elements, such as his accent, appearance, and backstory, were significantly altered. The visual effects team, led by Oscar-winning visual effects supervisor Michael Fink, played a critical role in realizing the film's metaphysical world. The depiction of hell, for instance, was a major technical undertaking. Rather than drawing from traditional fire and brimstone imagery, the filmmakers imagined hell as a scorched, wind-blown version of our own world, constantly ravaged by nuclear-like shockwaves and inhabited by grotesque demons. The hell sequences were shot using a combination of practical effects and digital manipulation. To create the otherworldly sky and environmental chaos, the production team shot plates of ruined cityscapes and then digitally augmented them with swirling clouds, molten skies, and disintegrating structures. Actors were filmed against green screens and composited into these hellish backgrounds. The end result was a disturbingly familiar yet alien place that felt emotionally resonant rather than fantastical. The design of the demons and other supernatural creatures required close collaboration between practical makeup artists and digital animators. The demonic designs were inspired by a mix of Christian mythology, biological decay, and Lovecraftian horror. Some demons, like the half-breed Balthazar, appeared fully human with subtle signs of corruption, reddened eyes, oily skin, twitchy movements, while others, such as the winged demonic entities in the climax, required full-body prosthetics or CGI. The makeup team often used silicone, airbrushing, and contact lenses to bring these creatures to life on set, allowing for more naturalistic interactions between the human characters and their monstrous counterparts. One of the most iconic behind-the-scenes anecdotes involves Peter Stormare's interpretation of Lucifer. Originally, Lucifer was written to appear as a traditional horned demon or a sleek, modern villain. But Stormare suggested a more eccentric approach, a barefoot man in a white linen suit, with tar dripping from his feet, suggesting rot hidden beneath purity. This idea was embraced by the director and costuming department, who helped bring Stormare's vision to life. The result was a version of the devil that was both disarmingly charming and profoundly disturbing. Stormare's improvisational style brought an unpredictable energy to the scene, and his performance is still widely regarded as one of the film's most memorable elements. The scene required careful lighting and sound design to emphasize the slow buildup of tension, and the entire crew worked in quiet synchronization to create the unnerving atmosphere. Another notable aspect of the production involved the casting and filming of Tilda Swinton's character, Gabriel. Swinton was chosen specifically because of her ability to embody both masculine and feminine qualities, and her portrayal of an androgynous angel added a rich layer of ambiguity to the film's theology. Her wardrobe was carefully constructed to be gender-neutral and otherworldly, with flowing robes and armor that suggested both elegance and martial readiness. Swinton spent significant time developing Gabriel's body language and vocal cadence, choosing a calm, authoritative tone that bordered on clinical detachment. Behind the scenes, the character was one of the most debated among the creative team, as Gabriel's motivations are complex and not easily categorized as good or evil. Lawrence worked closely with Swinton to ensure that her performance walked that line, and many of her scenes were filmed with extra takes to capture different emotional nuances. One of the biggest production challenges was managing the film's tone. The studio initially envisioned Constantine as a PG-13 action film, but the Motion Picture Association of America ultimately gave it an R rating for its thematic content, violence, and disturbing images. The narrative of Constantine is structured as a supernatural noir thriller, unfolding in a world where the veil between the physical and spiritual realms is thin, and the protagonist, John Constantine, navigates both worlds with jaded defiance. The film's plot is layered with theological questions, personal demons, and cryptic revelations that gradually unravel to reveal a cosmic conspiracy. Rather than follow the traditional superhero origin arc or linear good versus evil storyline, Constantine operates within a morally ambiguous landscape where salvation is never guaranteed, and power is often found in sacrifice rather than strength. The structure of the film is carefully crafted to escalate mystery, deepen emotional stakes, and build toward a climactic moment of spiritual reckoning. The film opens in Mexico with a cold open sequence centered on a mysterious object, the Spear of Destiny, a relic said to have pierced the side of Christ during the crucifixion. This sequence, which shows a scavenger discovering the spear wrapped in a Nazi flag and being immediately possessed by a demonic force, sets the tone for the entire film, historical religious symbolism blended with modern horror and action. The opening functions as a prologue, establishing a looming supernatural threat while not yet introducing the protagonist. This choice allows for immediate engagement through mystery and suspense before grounding the audience in Constantine's personal story. We are then introduced to John Constantine in Los Angeles, performing an exorcism on a young girl possessed by a demon attempting to break through to the human plane, a violation of the balance between heaven and hell. This exorcism scene is a crucial narrative and tonal foundation. It introduces the central rules of the world. God and the devil have a wager for human souls, and their influence on Earth is limited to half-breeds, angels and demons that interact with humans without full possession. Constantine acts as a reluctant enforcer of that balance, using his knowledge of magic, rituals, and theology to banish demons back to hell. The scene also reveals Constantine's fraught relationship with both heaven and hell, his health problems, he is dying of lung cancer, and his growing sense of futility in his efforts. From here, the narrative picks up with Angela Dodson, an LAPD detective investigating the apparent suicide of her twin sister Isabel. Angela believes her sister would never have taken her own life and begins searching for answers. Her journey intersects with Constantine's after she watches security footage of Isabel leaping from a psychiatric hospital rooftop while whispering Constantine's name. This mystery becomes the primary narrative thread, bringing the film into detective thriller territory. Angela seeks Constantine's help, and their partnership becomes the central dynamic through which the plot unfolds. As they investigate Isabel's death, they uncover a plot by Mammon, the son of Lucifer, to enter the human world by possessing a mortal body, an act that would upset the cosmic balance and trigger apocalyptic consequences. The pacing of Constantine is deliberate, allowing for slow-burn suspense and character development in the first act before gradually accelerating into action-heavy sequences in the second and third acts. The narrative unfolds through a combination of exposition, ritual scenes, and character-driven revelations. For example, we learn more about Constantine's past, including his childhood ability to see angels and demons, which led to trauma, institutionalization, and a suicide attempt that damned him to hell. He is now desperately trying to earn redemption, not out of faith, but out of fear. This internal conflict drives much of his behavior and gives emotional weight to his otherwise stoic persona. The middle of the film expands the mythology of the world. Constantine visits Papa Midnight's Club, a neutral ground for half-breeds and those attuned to the occult. Here, Constantine seeks knowledge, alliances, and artifacts to combat the growing threat. Scenes set in Midnight's Club serve as world-building tools, introducing the spiritual black market and the blurred line between sacred and profane. These scenes also serve as narrative pauses, allowing the viewer to absorb information and atmosphere before the plot intensifies again. A pivotal moment occurs when Constantine uses a mystical ritual to travel to hell and confirm Isabel's soul has indeed been damned. This scene is not only a plot revelation but also a stylistic showcase and a metaphorical descent into Constantine's personal guilt and trauma. The narrative structure here echoes mythological heroes' journeys, descents into the underworld to retrieve knowledge or confront inner darkness. This moment deepens the stakes and compels Constantine and Angela to uncover the forces manipulating events behind the scenes. As they move closer to the truth, Constantine and Angela realize that Mammon's plan involves using a psychic link through Angela's repressed spiritual gifts and the Spear of Destiny, now in the possession of Balthazar and Gabriel. The film introduces its central twist here. Gabriel, the archangel, has gone rogue and is aiding Mammon's plan in order to bring about a world where humanity is forced to earn salvation through suffering. This subversion of angelic motives adds a layer of moral complexity to the narrative. Gabriel's betrayal is not driven by malice, but by a warped sense of divine justice. The reveal is handled with minimal fanfare, allowing the implications to settle with chilling clarity. The climax begins with Constantine confronting Balthazar and then Gabriel, only to be overpowered. As Mammon prepares to possess Angela, Constantine uses his last resort. He slits his wrists, forcing a moment of death that will summon Lucifer himself, to whom Constantine's soul is owed. This sacrificial act becomes the turning point of the story. Rather than fighting fire with fire, Constantine wins by choosing death and submission over violence, a narrative choice that echoes themes of Christ-like sacrifice and moral redemption. Lucifer arrives, played by Peter Stormare in an unforgettable scene, and uncovers Gabriel's betrayal. In a twist of spiritual irony, Lucifer saves the world, not out of altruism, but out of personal spite against his son and Gabriel. When Lucifer attempts to claim Constantine's soul, he discovers that Constantine's selfless act has earned him redemption. Heaven begins to claim his soul, but Lucifer, refusing to let Constantine escape damnation, heals his wounds and resurrects him, giving him another chance to sin. This inversion of reward and punishment underscores the film's central theological paradoxes. Redemption is found not through power or deeds, but through genuine sacrifice and humility. The resolution sees Gabriel depowered by God, left immortal, and Angela restored. Constantine, now alive again and cured of cancer, chooses to live a better life. In a final, quiet moment, he offers Angela the spear for safekeeping and walks away. The film ends on a contemplative note rather than a triumphant one. The mid-credits scene, if viewed, reveals Constantine placing a lighter on Chaz's grave, only to see Chaz reappear as a winged being, suggesting that he too has found a form of redemption or ascension. Constantine operates on multiple thematic levels, weaving together theological inquiry, psychological trauma, and philosophical ambiguity. Though it takes the form of a supernatural thriller, the film is rich with symbolic meaning and abstract reflection. It explores profound themes such as redemption, free will, the nature of belief, the duality of good and evil, and the burden of knowledge. Through its characters, visual motifs, and story arcs, the film poses challenging questions about the structure of the universe, the fallibility of moral systems, and the possibility of salvation for broken people. Much of the film's power lies in its refusal to provide easy answers, instead inviting viewers to reflect on metaphysical uncertainties and the human condition. One of the central themes is redemption, particularly the idea that redemption must be earned through selfless action, not through ritual, belief, or bargaining. John Constantine is a character who knows, beyond doubt, that hell exists. He has seen it, experienced it, and is condemned to return there because of a suicide attempt in his youth. This direct knowledge removes any possibility of faith in the traditional sense. He doesn't believe because he hopes. He believes because he has witnessed. Yet, his knowledge does not bring him peace. It brings desperation. His actions throughout the film are motivated not by a love of God or humanity, but by a personal desire to avoid damnation. He performs exorcisms, fights demons, and seeks the approval of heaven, but all of it is driven by fear and pride rather than virtue. The film's moral arc hinges on Constantine's ultimate choice to sacrifice himself not for personal gain, but to save another. It is only in surrendering his life to stop Mammon that he achieves redemption, illustrating the core idea that salvation is not transactional but transformational. This leads to another core theme, the tension between free will and predestination. The film frequently returns to the question of whether individuals are truly free to choose their paths or whether they are bound by fate, divine judgment, or supernatural manipulation. Constantine's life is shaped by forces beyond his control, his ability to see demons and angels, his damnation due to a youthful suicide, and the cosmic wager between God and the devil. Yet, the story affirms that within this rigid framework, choice still matters. Gabriel's fall from grace, Lucifer's decision to save Constantine, and Constantine's sacrificial act all reflect the unpredictable nature of free will. The characters defy their supposed roles. Angels betray, devils protect, and condemned men redeem themselves. The film suggests that even in a world governed by cosmic rules, the smallest human decisions can alter destinies. Faith and belief are also major thematic pillars. Angela Dodson's character arc revolves around her repressed psychic abilities and her struggle to reconcile her rational, law enforcement background with the mystical reality of her world. Her twin sister Isabel embraced her visions and was institutionalized, while Angela buried hers, choosing reason over revelation. Angela's journey is one of awakening, not just to supernatural forces, but to her own intuitive and emotional truth. In a broader sense, the film explores how people respond to the supernatural. Constantine, who believes because he is seen, is bitter and exhausted. Angela, who believes only after being confronted with undeniable evidence, represents the reluctant awakening of faith. The film critiques blind belief, but also suggests that belief without action is hollow. The film also delves into the theme of identity and alienation. Constantine is a man caught between two worlds, human and supernatural, heaven and hell. He is never fully accepted by either side. His knowledge isolates him. He walks through the world burdened by visions no one else sees, performing rituals that save others, but never himself. This alienation is symbolized by his chain-smoking and terminal illness, physical signs of his self-destructive tendencies and internal rot. Constantine's cynicism is not without cause. He has seen the worst of existence and found no comfort in the dogmas of organized religion or the promises of divine reward. His loneliness becomes a defining trait, making his eventual act of self-sacrifice even more meaningful. It is the moment he transcends isolation and connects, truly, with another soul. Duality is another recurring theme, especially the duality of good and evil, light and dark, human and divine. The film challenges binary morality. Gabriel, a supposed agent of heaven, becomes the villain by trying to impose suffering as a path to righteousness. Lucifer, expected to be the ultimate antagonist, becomes a savior in the end. The half-breeds, such as Balthazar, embody this duality in form and function. Papa Midnight, a former witch doctor who has sworn neutrality, represents the balance between light and dark and the danger of inaction in a world that demands moral choices. Even the city of Los Angeles becomes a liminal space, sunlit but decayed, familiar yet haunted, reflecting the in-between nature of the characters who inhabit it. On a symbolic level, Constantine is saturated with religious and mythological imagery. The Spear of Destiny is a potent Christian artifact, representing ultimate power and the physical connection to Christ's suffering. Its reappearance in modern hands symbolizes the cyclical nature of sin and the danger of sacred power in unworthy hands. The spear is more than a weapon, it is a key to opening the gates of hell. Its presence in the story reflects the larger theme of humanity's dangerous flirtation with forbidden knowledge and divine tools. Water is another powerful symbol throughout the film. It is used in exorcisms, baptismal rituals, and as a gateway between realms. When Constantine immerses Angela in water to awaken her psychic abilities, the scene evokes themes of rebirth and transformation. Water becomes a liminal substance that blurs the line between physical and spiritual states. Similarly, mirrors play a symbolic role, particularly in the exorcism scenes. Mirrors are portals, reflections, and traps. They reveal what the eye cannot see and serve as boundaries between the seen and the unseen. The use of mirrors in exorcisms emphasizes the theme of hidden realities and the dual nature of all things. Smoking is also loaded with metaphorical weight. Constantine's addiction to cigarettes is not only a cause of his cancer, but a physical manifestation of his spiritual decay. Each cigarette is a small act of self-destruction, a gesture of defiance, and a symbol of resignation. The ritual of smoking becomes a metaphor for his disconnection from life and his slow march toward death. When he is cured at the end, the suggestion that he might quit smoking hints at a deeper renewal, not just of body, but of purpose. The film's depiction of hell is symbolically distinct. Rather than a fire and brimstone realm filled with torment, hell is portrayed as a twisted version of earth, familiar but distorted, ravaged by wind and flame. This vision suggests that hell is not a separate place, but a corrupted reflection of reality, echoing the idea that damnation is not only about punishment, but about isolation, distortion, and eternal repetition. The hell sequences are often tied to moments of emotional or moral crisis, reinforcing the symbolic connection between inner suffering and external damnation. The visual style of Constantine is one of its most defining and memorable elements, creating a gritty, ethereal, and immersive world that blends noir aesthetics with supernatural surrealism. Directed by Francis Lawrence and shot by cinematographer Philippe Rousselot, the film employs a carefully constructed visual language that enhances its themes of spiritual decay, moral ambiguity, and existential dread. From its use of light and shadow to its symbolic color palettes and meticulous composition, every frame of Constantine contributes to an atmosphere of tension and metaphysical discomfort. The cinematography and visual design are not just tools for storytelling but vital components of the film's tone, mood, and philosophical depth. The film's overall visual tone is rooted in urban noir, drawing from the aesthetics of classic detective stories and film noir. This influence is evident in the frequent use of shadows, rain-soaked streets, smoke, and dimly lit interiors. Los Angeles, the setting of the film, is presented not as a bright, sunny metropolis, but as a decaying spiritual battleground cloaked in darkness and decay. The cityscape is filled with crumbling buildings, empty alleyways, and forgotten churches, all of which contribute to a sense of abandonment and moral erosion. The locations are lit in a way that emphasizes gloom and uncertainty, often with deep contrast between light and shadow, which mirrors the protagonist's internal conflict and the overarching theme of duality. Lighting plays a critical role in the film's cinematography. The lighting design often uses motivated sources, meaning light that appears to come from within the world of the film, such as lamps, windows, or candles. But these sources are exaggerated to create a dramatic effect. For instance, exorcism scenes are bathed in a cold, sterile light that emphasizes the alien nature of the demonic presence, while hell sequences use fiery, flickering tones to evoke chaos and torment. Many scenes feature a single, harsh source of light surrounded by darkness, which visually isolates the characters and reflects their psychological isolation. In Gabriel's final confrontation, for example, divine light pours down in controlled beams, highlighting her once holy nature even as she is being judged. These moments use light symbolically, not just practically, turning illumination itself into a kind of narrative force. The film also makes extensive use of color as symbolic vocabulary. The dominant color palette is desaturated and leans toward muted tones, grays, browns, dark greens, and ash-like yellows. These colors convey a world drained of joy, weighed down by sin and suffering. In contrast, certain supernatural moments introduce stark color shifts. Scenes involving demonic forces are often tinged with sickly greens and reds, while moments of divine intervention or spiritual awakening are accompanied by golden light or sudden flashes of white. This use of color coding helps the audience subconsciously track the presence of otherworldly forces. For instance, Constantine's trips to hell are marked by a shift to scorched oranges and sickly yellows, while his resurrection scene at the climax is bathed in warm, pure light that immediately distinguishes it from the rest of the film's cooler palette. Camera movement in Constantine is typically restrained and deliberate, mirroring the film's solemn tone. Long takes, slow pans, and lingering close-ups are used to build tension and create intimacy with the characters. When action scenes occur, the camera rarely adopts the frantic, shaky style common in other supernatural or comic book films of the era. Instead, Lawrence and Rousselot opt for a composed, almost meditative approach, allowing the viewer to absorb the details of the environment and the emotional weight of the moment. In scenes such as the battle with Balthazar or Constantine's descent into hell, the cinematography allows the spectacle to unfold with clarity and purpose rather than overwhelming the viewer with rapid cuts. Framing is another essential tool in the film's visual storytelling. Constantine is often framed alone in wide shots, emphasizing his isolation from both the human and supernatural worlds. His solitary silhouette against a bleak backdrop becomes a recurring visual motif. In scenes of confrontation, whether with demons, angels, or his own inner demons, he is frequently placed at the center of the frame but surrounded by emptiness or darkness. This spatial design underscores his existential loneliness and the burden he carries. Angela, in contrast, is often shown in over-the-shoulder shots or mid-close UPS that reflect her growing sense of entrapment and discovery. As her arc progresses and she begins to see the world as Constantine does, the framing shifts to more symmetrical, centered compositions, suggesting a new alignment between their perspectives. Symbolic imagery is deeply embedded in the film's visual structure. The cross, the crucifix, mirrors, water, fire, and relics such as the Spear of Destiny are not just props, they are given space within the frame to resonate as metaphors. The camera lingers on these objects, often placing them in the foreground while characters remain in the background, as if to suggest that these symbols hold greater power than the humans who wield them. One striking example is the use of the mirror during the opening exorcism. The possessed girl is confronted with a mirror, through which the demon is drawn and then shattered. The mirror becomes a literal portal, but also a symbol of self-reflection and entrapment. The composition of this sequence, tight angles, reflections within reflections, and rapid shifts in perspective, conveys chaos while still adhering to a coherent visual plan. The depiction of hell is one of the most visually ambitious aspects of the film. Rather than presenting it as a cavernous inferno or medieval nightmare, hell in Constantine is portrayed as a scorched, apocalyptic version of Earth. Burned-out buildings, debris blowing in radioactive winds, and a golden, almost bleached-out sky create a terrifying yet familiar landscape. These sequences were created using a blend of practical effects, digital enhancements, and color grading to distort real-world locations. The choice to portray hell as a corrupted version of Earth reinforces the film's message that damnation is not necessarily a far-off, foreign place. It's a mirror of our own world twisted by sin and spiritual decay. The visual effects are seamlessly integrated into the cinematography, enhancing rather than overpowering the physical performances and sets. CGI is used sparingly and effectively. The wings of Gabriel and Chaz, the demonic transformations, and the shockwaves of hell are rendered with subtlety, maintaining the tone of grounded realism. Effects are treated not as spectacle, but as spiritual phenomena. Even when supernatural events occur, the camera maintains a human perspective, avoiding fantastical angles or disembodied motion. This choice maintains a sense of authenticity and makes the spiritual realm feel immediate and personal. The soundscape of Constantine plays a vital, if often understated, role in building its darkly atmospheric world. While much of the film's attention is typically focused on its visuals, the sonic elements are just as meticulously crafted to enhance mood, underscore emotion, and deepen immersion in the story's metaphysical terrain. From the haunting musical score to the nuanced layering of ambient effects, Constantine uses sound to amplify tension, signify supernatural presence, and connect viewers to the psychological states of its characters. The auditory design of the film is inseparable from its impact, serving not just as background, but as an active narrative tool. The musical score for Constantine was composed by Brian Tyler and Klaus Badelt, with Tyler contributing additional material to support Badelt's original themes. The score moves fluidly between orchestral intensity and minimal, atmospheric tones, blending traditional scoring with more experimental textures. This duality mirrors the film's thematic concern with the interplay of light and dark, human and divine, chaos and order. At its core, the music serves as an emotional guide through the film's labyrinthine plot and shifting spiritual landscapes. One of the most notable aspects of the score is its restraint. Rather than overwhelming the viewer with bombast, the music often lingers in the background as a low, ominous presence. Sustained string notes, deep percussion, and ambient tones fill scenes with a slow-burning tension. This approach allows the atmosphere to build naturally, mirroring the pacing of the film. In dialogue-heavy scenes, the music remains minimal, often using a single repeated motif or tonal drone to underscore unease. This creates a sonic texture that keeps the audience subtly on edge without drawing attention away from the emotional dynamics of the characters. The main theme of the film, while not overtly melodic, incorporates elements of religious choral music, subtle Gregorian-style chanting, and minor-key, harmonic progressions that evoke feelings of solemnity and judgment. This fusion of sacred music with cinematic scoring reflects the film's spiritual subject matter. In scenes involving divine or demonic intervention, the score often transitions into a more orchestral mode. Blaring brass and rising strings swell to mark the intrusion of supernatural forces into the mortal world. These musical shifts act as emotional cues, preparing the audience for a tonal change in the scene's intensity or meaning. One of the most emotionally resonant musical moments occurs during Constantine's act of self-sacrifice near the film's climax. As he slits his wrists to summon Lucifer, the music moves from tense strings into a more mournful, almost redemptive theme. Soft piano and subtle choral elements rise beneath the visuals, signaling not only the gravity of the act, but its underlying nobility. In this scene, music serves as a narrative pivot. Where other scenes are driven by anxiety or dread, this one conveys an unexpected peace, hinting at the possibility of grace. Beyond the orchestral score, Constantine also uses sound design in innovative ways to support its horror, action, and spiritual dimensions. The film's sound editing is meticulous in crafting the eerie ambience of its supernatural world. Background noise is often layered with barely perceptible elements, whispers, guttural breaths, distant wails, or the flutter of unseen wings. These sounds add an auditory sense of presence to the unseen and imply constant surveillance by otherworldly entities. In scenes involving demons or angelic beings, the sound often includes low-frequency vibrations or distorted audio that makes the viewer feel physically unsettled, as if reality itself is warping. For example, during Constantine's descent into hell, the sound design is critical to the audience's immersion. The wind howls violently, like a sandstorm layered with screams and sharp metallic rips. The sonic environment becomes overwhelming, claustrophobic, and abrasive. These layers of noise don't just suggest physical destruction, they embody the emotional and spiritual disintegration of hell. Even when the visuals momentarily settle, the auditory chaos continues, reinforcing the idea that hell is not just a place, but a constant psychological pressure. Another standout element of the film's sound design is how it treats the voice and presence of supernatural beings. Gabriel's voice, for example, is treated with subtle reverberation in certain scenes to give an otherworldly quality without relying on obvious effects. Her words are calm and measured, but the sound design gives them weight, as if spoken from within a cathedral. Lucifer's arrival is announced not by thunder or fire, but by the sudden disappearance of all other sound, a vacuum, a suspension of reality. The drop into silence, followed by the slow, sticky footsteps and the hiss of tar, builds more dread than any loud musical cue could achieve. The decision to withhold sound or use it sparingly often has more impact than bombastic crescendos. Weapons and magical artifacts in the film also carry distinct aural signatures. Constantine's holy shotgun has a mechanical yet sacred sound to it, combining traditional gunfire with metallic, echoing reverb that suggests arcane power. The crucifix-based relics used for exorcisms emit shimmering, high-pitched tones when activated, almost like bells rung in a dark cathedral. These sonic elements lend the weapons a liturgical, ceremonial quality, reinforcing the idea that Constantine is a soldier in a spiritual war, wielding instruments that are as much symbols as they are tools. One of the most emotionally nuanced uses of sound occurs in the scenes involving Angela and Isabel. Isabel's death scene, captured on hospital surveillance footage, is accompanied by barely audible whispering and ethereal audio distortions. These sonic textures suggest both the presence of spiritual forces and the emotional trauma of Angela witnessing her sister's final moments. When Angela later undergoes her water immersion to awaken her psychic abilities, the sound becomes muffled, dreamlike, and surreal. Her breathing echoes unnaturally, as if she's submerged in memory as much as water. These effects help blur the line between physical experience and psychological vision, allowing the viewer to feel as disoriented and overwhelmed as the character herself. Outside of the score and diegetic sound, Constantine also makes sparing but effective use of licensed music. Unlike many action films of its era, it does not rely on pop or rock songs to set tone or signal cultural references. Instead, it favors mood pieces and background tracks that maintain immersion rather than distract from it. One exception is the brief appearance of Passive by a Perfect Circle during the end credits, a haunting, melancholic track that reflects the emotional ambiguity of the film's conclusion. The lyrics and tone of the song capture Constantine's complex position as a reluctant hero and hint at unresolved spiritual questions. Upon its release in February 2005, Constantine was met with a mixed but heavily polarized response from both critics and audiences. The film, adapted loosely from the DC/Vertigo comic series Hellblazer, attracted attention for its blend of religious horror, noir aesthetic, and philosophical undertones, but it also sparked debates about its fidelity to source material, tonal direction, and narrative complexity. Over time, however, the film has achieved a level of cult status, with reevaluations by fans and critics who have come to appreciate its distinctive voice in the world of comic book adaptations. Critically, Constantine received a lukewarm reception upon its theatrical debut. Many reviewers praised the film's visual flair and atmospheric depth, but criticized its convoluted plot and tonal inconsistency. On aggregate scoring sites at the time of release, the film hovered around average scores, reflecting a divided consensus. Critics noted the film's strength in world-building and mood, but some expressed frustration with what they perceived as an over-reliance on exposition and underdevelopment of character relationships. The narrative complexity, while appealing to some viewers, was cited by others as opaque or needlessly confusing. One major point of contention centered around the casting of Keanu Reeves as John Constantine. Fans of the Hellblazer comics were vocal in their disappointment that the character's original British identity, blonde hair, and sardonic punk rock demeanor were altered in favor of a brooding, chain-smoking American exorcist. To purists, this change represented a departure from the gritty realism and irreverent tone that defined the comics. Yet to others, Reeves brought a quiet, philosophical depth to the character that offered a fresh interpretation. His performance, though subdued, was praised by many for its stoic intensity and emotional restraint. Over time, his portrayal has been reassessed more favorably, especially given the growing appreciation of his unique screen presence and minimalist acting style. The film's religious themes also spark debate. Constantine does not shy away from theological subject matter, including depictions of heaven and hell, angels and demons, suicide, damnation, and redemption. Some critics lauded the film for exploring these heavy themes in a stylized, engaging way. Others felt the approach was heavy-handed or muddled, particularly when the film veered into territory that mixed Christian iconography with fantasy horror tropes. The representation of figures like Lucifer, Gabriel, and the half-breed angels and demons was seen by some religious commentators as provocative or inappropriate, while others appreciated the creative liberties taken in crafting a fictional metaphysical system. Audiences responded more positively than critics overall, with box office numbers reflecting solid interest. Constantine opened with strong numbers, grossing over $230 million worldwide against a budget estimated between $70 and $100 million. This made the film a commercial success, even if it fell short of the massive numbers seen by other comic book films of its era like Spider-Man 2 or Batman Begins. Its financial success proved there was an audience for darker, more adult-oriented adaptations of comic book properties, a trend that would later be more fully realized in projects like Logan, Watchmen, and Deadpool. Some viewers appreciated the film precisely because it diverged from the more sanitized superhero formula. The grim, introspective tone and emphasis on moral ambiguity set Constantine apart from other films in the genre at the time. Its focus on themes like suicide, terminal illness, and spiritual corruption gave it a weight that many fans found refreshing. For a segment of the audience, the film's flaws were outweighed by its ambition and originality. Online communities and fan forums became spaces for discussion and defense of the film, contributing to its long-term cult following. However, Constantine was not without its detractors. In addition to criticisms of narrative pacing and source material fidelity, the film was sometimes seen as over-stylized at the expense of emotional resonance. Some reviewers noted that despite its impressive visuals and philosophical scope, the film occasionally struggled to make its characters relatable or emotionally engaging. Angela Dodson, played by Rachel Weisz, was cited by some critics as underwritten, with her motivations and personal arc feeling secondary to Constantine's journey. Similarly, supporting characters like Beeman, Chaz, and Papa Midnight were praised for their potential, but sometimes felt underutilized within the sprawling narrative. The film's tonal shifts also drew mixed reactions. At times, Constantine leans heavily into horror, with moments of demonic possession, exorcisms, and body horror. At other times, it delves into action sequences that feel more in line with standard blockbuster fare. For some, this blend was seamless and engaging, but for others, it led to a jarring viewing experience. The balance between philosophy, horror, and action did not always land uniformly for all viewers. Awards recognition for Constantine was limited, though the film did receive nominations in several genre-focused circles. It earned a Saturn Award nomination for Best Horror Film, with Keanu Reeves receiving attention for Best Actor within the same category. The film also received some accolades for its visual effects and art direction, particularly in design-focused discussions where the depiction of hell and supernatural elements were widely admired. Although it did not break into mainstream awards territory, its technical craft was frequently acknowledged by those familiar with production design and cinematography. In later years, critical opinion has gradually shifted in favor of the film. As audiences have become more accustomed to morally complex protagonists and unconventional narratives in genre cinema, Constantine has gained new appreciation for its ambition and distinct voice. Modern retrospectives often highlight the film's enduring aesthetic, its unflinching approach to spirituality, and its relevance to contemporary questions about sin, redemption, and the afterlife. Critics who once dismissed the film as muddled or off-tone have revisited it with a more nuanced perspective, acknowledging its depth and singularity in a landscape crowded with formulaic comic book adaptations. The increasing popularity of Keanu Reeves in the 2010s and 2020s, particularly following the success of the John Wick franchise, also led to renewed interest in Constantine. Fans and critics began to reevaluate his performance in the film through the lens of his career resurgence, drawing parallels between his portrayals of weary, principled antiheroes. This cultural reappraisal has contributed to growing calls for a sequel, which gained serious momentum in the 2020s as more fans and creators voiced support for a return to the world of Constantine, with Reeves reprising the role. Though Constantine was initially met with mixed reactions from critics and comic book fans, its long-term legacy has grown substantially, particularly within the realms of supernatural cinema, comic book adaptations, and cult filmmaking. Over the 2 decades since its release, the film has achieved a cult following, inspired creative reappraisals, influenced stylistic choices in later genre films, and sparked discussions about religious and philosophical storytelling in mainstream cinema. Its legacy is not one of immediate dominance, but of persistent relevance, evolving appreciation, and cross-media influence. One of the most lasting contributions Constantine made to the genre landscape was proving that comic book adaptations could delve into mature, spiritual, and philosophical territory, while still maintaining visual flair and action appeal. Before Constantine, comic-based films were largely dominated by straightforward hero versus villain structures, often aimed at younger audiences or defined by brightly lit worlds of clear moral divisions. Constantine helped shift this perception by demonstrating that the supernatural horror and noir elements found in comics like Hellblazer could be translated into compelling, atmospheric cinema for adult audiences. The film's moody aesthetic, heavy with shadow, saturated with cold color palettes, and steeped in religious symbolism, has had a noticeable influence on subsequent supernatural and urban fantasy films. Later movies like The Rite, Legion, The Prophecy, and The Last Witch Hunter borrow visual motifs from Constantine, including its depiction of a morally ambiguous protagonist navigating a spiritually torn world. Even in more recent years, shows like The Sandman and American Gods, which play with myth, faith, and otherworldly beings interacting with modern life, carry traces of Constantine's approach to storytelling, where gods and devils are as psychologically complex as they are mythic. Visually, Constantine helped to solidify a template for what urban occultism looks like on screen. Its depiction of Los Angeles as both a contemporary city and a gateway to metaphysical realms established a blueprint followed by other filmmakers seeking to portray the supernatural hiding in plain sight. The visual language of dark alleyways, dimly lit churches, occult symbols carved into architecture, and muted religious iconography found in Constantine has become standard in the visual design of many subsequent dark fantasy properties. The film's treatment of its main character, John Constantine, also left a mark on the archetype of the reluctant antihero in modern cinema. Constantine is not a traditional superhero. He's a chain-smoking, terminally ill exorcist burdened with guilt, disdain for celestial bureaucracy, and a deep ambivalence about humanity. His lack of traditional heroism, moral absolutism, or desire for glory influenced how other morally gray characters were written in genre films and television. The idea of a hero who is less concerned with saving the world and more with personal redemption, seen later in characters like Matt Murdock in Daredevil, Jesse Custer in Preacher, or even Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, owes a thematic debt to what Constantine brought to the screen in 2005. One of the most tangible parts of Constantine's legacy is its enduring fan base and the ongoing demand for a sequel. For years, rumors and speculation surrounded the possibility of a return to the character, with both Keanu Reeves and director Francis Lawrence expressing interest in revisiting the world of Constantine. Fans launched petitions, shared fan art, and continually discussed the film across forums, conventions, and social media platforms. Their commitment contributed significantly to the film's reevaluation and played a role in shaping studio perceptions of its viability as a franchise. This persistence was finally rewarded when, years after its release, active development of a sequel was confirmed in the 2020s, with Keanu Reeves set to reprise his role and Francis Lawrence returning to direct. The announcement was met with enthusiasm across social media, fan communities, and film circles, not just as a long-overdue continuation, but as validation for a film that had quietly gained respect over time. The sequel, still in development, is poised to build upon the original's mythology while taking advantage of the evolved cinematic landscape in which darker, R-rated comic book films are now more accepted and even celebrated. Beyond film and direct sequel potential, Constantine influenced other media representations of the character and surrounding mythos. A TV adaptation titled Constantine aired in 2014 with Matt Ryan in the titular role, aligning more closely with the comic's depiction of the character in both appearance and origin. While short-lived, the series garnered a loyal fan base and later integrated Ryan's version of Constantine into the Arrowverse, where he appeared in Legends of Tomorrow and crossover episodes. While these versions differed from Keanu Reeves' interpretation, the visibility and interest in the character owed much to the 2005 film's impact in raising his profile among mainstream audiences. In terms of merchandise and branding, Constantine has not generated the sprawling empire seen in more commercial comic adaptations, but it has maintained a steady stream of niche memorabilia. Posters, art prints, fan novels, replica items, such as Constantine's lighter or crucifix shotgun, and special edition DVDs and Blu-rays continue to circulate among fans. The film's unique visual and thematic identity lends itself well to collectibles and tribute items, particularly among audiences drawn to occult themes and darker aesthetic styles. The film also contributed to the growing recognition of Keanu Reeves as a versatile and enduring actor. While he had already established himself through the Matrix trilogy, Constantine reinforced his image as a thoughtful action star willing to explore spiritual and philosophical territory. This reputation would later inform how audiences received his performances in other introspective genre films, including John Wick, 47 Ronin, and Replicas. The resurgence of his career in the 2010s and beyond has only increased interest in his earlier roles, including Constantine, which is now often cited as one of his most underrated performances. Culturally, Constantine remains a reference point for conversations around the intersection of faith, morality, and popular media. It is often brought up in discussions about religious horror or theological thrillers, not just for its imagery, but for its willingness to pose difficult questions without offering neat answers. Its depiction of heaven and hell, for instance, is frequently cited in comparative analysis, especially due to its creative visualization of hell as a ruined, wind-blasted mirror of our world, a concept that has influenced subsequent representations in film, television, and video games. Moreover, Constantine's influence extends to fan culture, where its characters, lines, and visuals continue to inspire fan fiction, cosplay, digital art, and analysis. Gabriel's ambiguous motivations, Lucifer's iconic white suit appearance, and Constantine's grizzled antihero persona remain popular across online communities. The release of Constantine in 2005 presented audiences with a film that defied conventional categorization. It wasn't quite a superhero movie, nor a traditional horror film, nor a standard action thriller. Instead, it occupied a space where existential philosophy, religious symbolism, and noir aesthetics converged. This complexity yielded a wide array of interpretations and emotional responses from audiences, many of whom walked away from the film with thoughts that went far beyond typical cinematic critique. While initial viewership was mixed in terms of critical response, the general audience reaction was far more layered, driven by personal beliefs, cultural perspectives, and emotional resonance with the film's themes. Many viewers connected deeply with the character of John Constantine, not as a typical hero, but as a profoundly flawed, human figure. His cynicism, bitterness, and emotional isolation resonated with those who saw in him a mirror of their own inner struggles. For people grappling with feelings of guilt, questions about salvation, or personal histories with religious dogma, Constantine's journey felt personal and familiar. Unlike most protagonists in genre films who are propelled by altruism, Constantine is driven by fear, regret, and a desperate need to find peace with himself. That particular emotional foundation allowed many viewers to interpret his character as someone navigating psychological trauma as much as supernatural forces. For people raised within or adjacent to strict religious systems, Constantine offered a narrative that felt both familiar and subversive. Its presentation of angels and demons as political actors with ambiguous agendas mirrored the way many perceive religious institutions in real life, complex, contradictory, and often detached from the everyday suffering of people. Audiences from deeply religious backgrounds often reflected on the film's theological ambiguity with a sense of fascination. The film did not preach, condemn, or endorse any one belief system. Rather, it used religious symbolism as a framework to explore human morality. That left space for viewers to project their own understanding of faith onto the story, leading to vastly different interpretations depending on individual worldviews. Younger audiences in particular, especially those in their teens and early 20s at the time of release, found in Constantine a film that validated feelings of alienation and existential doubt. The mid-2000s were a time marked by cultural pessimism, the aftermath of global events like 9/11, growing tensions around religious extremism, and the looming uncertainties of war, politics, and identity. Constantine, with its visual representation of a world on the brink of spiritual collapse, seemed to echo the ambient fear and confusion that many young people felt, but didn't know how to articulate. The character's contempt for authority, both celestial and earthly, offered a cathartic outlet for frustration and disillusionment. Many viewers have recalled how watching Constantine during this period offered them solace, not through answers, but through recognition of their inner turmoil. The film also garnered deep interest among those fascinated by the occult, metaphysics, and alternative spiritual philosophies. The depiction of magical rites, exorcisms, astral projection, and interdimensional travel sparked curiosity and reflection among viewers already drawn to mystical traditions. For this audience, Constantine was less a horror film and more a cinematic ritual, a dramatized version of hidden knowledge and esoteric belief. Online forums, discussion threads, and fan sites dedicated to arcane symbols and spiritual theories often reference the film as a gateway to deeper exploration. Though fictional, The film's portrayal of magic as morally complex and deeply tied to human suffering was treated by many viewers with an almost reverent seriousness. LGBTQ+ audiences also found threads of relatability within the film's narrative. While Constantine does not explicitly address sexuality or gender identity, its themes of internal exile, societal rejection, and personal redemption carry metaphorical resonance for marginalized groups. John Constantine is a character who is not accepted by either the forces of heaven or hell, constantly reminded of his flaws and seeking meaning in a world that has no place for him. This state of spiritual and social liminality paralleled the experiences of many queer viewers who identified with the struggle of being stuck between worlds, unseen by systems that promise salvation or judgment. The film's refusal to offer a clear resolution, its embrace of ambiguity, mirrored the way many in the LGBTQ+ community navigate faith, identity, and belonging. There were also contrasting interpretations among viewers who focused on the film's philosophical messages. Some saw Constantine as a meditation on free will, presenting a universe where even the most powerful beings are governed by rules, contracts, and cosmic treaties. In this interpretation, Constantine's greatest act isn't one of power, but of choice, choosing to sacrifice himself, not for reward, but to ensure another's soul is saved. This interpretation resonated strongly with viewers who believe that moral worth lies in intent rather than outcome. Others saw the film as a critique of divine detachment, questioning the usefulness of a God who sits back while angels and demons wreak havoc on earth. For these viewers, Constantine was a cinematic lamentation, a cry against the silence of the divine in the face of human suffering. The depiction of hell in the film left a particularly strong impression on audiences. Rather than fire and brimstone fantasy, hell is presented as a decaying version of the real world, an apocalyptic echo of Earth bathed in flames and chaos. This vision of hell felt psychologically terrifying, not because of monsters but because of its familiarity. For many viewers, it captured a sense of existential dread, the fear that damnation is not a place far away, but a reflection of life gone wrong, of unresolved guilt, of loneliness that never ends. It is not uncommon to hear viewers refer to Constantine's hell as one of the most memorable depictions in cinematic history, precisely because it taps into a subconscious terror that life might be a purgatory of one's own making. Over the years, as social media and online communities grew, fans of the film began to share and exchange their interpretations more freely. This created a feedback loop where new viewers approached the film already aware of its deeper themes and thus primed to engage with it more thoughtfully. Memes, analysis videos, fan theories, and even theological breakdowns of the film's events helped keep Constantine in the cultural conversation. People who discovered the film post-2010 often report being surprised at how modern it feels in its themes, even if its visuals are rooted in early 2000s aesthetics. This intergenerational sharing has allowed Constantine to transcend its original moment and remain relevant to new viewers exploring similar questions about morality, mortality, and faith. At the heart of Constantine is not just a battle between heaven and hell, but a deeply personal, emotional journey through which its characters wrestle with identity, belief, guilt, and transformation. While the film thrives on atmosphere and supernatural conflict, its core strength lies in how it develops its characters, particularly John Constantine, Angela Dodson, and key secondary figures like Gabriel, Lucifer, and Chaz Kramer. Each character brings their own worldview, traumas, and motivations into the story, and through their arcs, the film builds a rich tapestry of moral ambiguity, emotional complexity, and philosophical weight. John Constantine, the central figure, begins the film already burdened by the consequences of his past. His character is introduced not as a rising hero, but as someone nearing the end of his journey. Terminally ill from lung cancer and emotionally hollowed out by a life spent fighting demons, Constantine has the weary demeanor of someone who has seen too much and believes in very little. What sets him apart as a protagonist is his deeply conflicted relationship with the world around him and with himself. He is cynical, emotionally closed off, and combative, especially with those who try to reach him on a personal level. Yet beneath this facade is a man suffocating under the weight of guilt, desperately seeking redemption not because he believes in it, but because he fears eternal damnation. One of the most compelling aspects of Constantine's character arc is his transition from self-preservation to self-sacrifice. Initially, his exorcisms and investigations appear driven by obligation and resignation. He doesn't save people because he wants to be good. He does it because he believes it might help him earn his way into heaven after a failed suicide attempt years earlier bar him from salvation. This transactional view of good and evil highlights Constantine's internal corruption, not in the traditional sense, but in his inability to view redemption as something freely given rather than earned through reluctant labor. Over the course of the film, as he becomes entangled in Angela's search for her sister's truth and uncovers the cosmic manipulations between heaven and hell, Constantine's motivations shift. His ultimate act, offering his soul in place of Angela's, marks the completion of his arc. For the first time, he performs a truly selfless act, not for reward or fear, but because it's right. This choice, born from a moment of spiritual clarity, earns him the redemption he could never grasp when he was trying to buy it. Angela Dodson represents a contrasting but complementary journey. As a police detective with a rational mind and a buried spiritual past, she begins the story skeptical of Constantine's claims and of the supernatural world in general. Her arc is one of reawakening, emotionally and spiritually. After the apparent suicide of her twin sister Isabel, Angela is haunted by the feeling that there was more to her sister's death than mental illness. This gut feeling, rooted in a deep psychic bond she shared with Isabel since childhood, drives her into Constantine's world, forcing her to confront truths she has spent years repressing. Through their journey together, Angela regains not only a connection to her repressed psychic abilities, but also to a larger spiritual framework that she had long denied. Her transformation is quieter than Constantine's, but equally important. She learns to trust her instincts, opens herself to realities beyond empirical proof, and finds meaning in her sister's death. Her role also grounds the film emotionally, serving as the human lens through which the audience experiences the otherworldly. The dynamic between Constantine and Angela is marked by restraint and mutual understanding. Unlike many genre films where romantic tension is played overtly, their relationship is defined by emotional intimacy rather than physical expression. This decision allows their bond to feel more profound and authentic. They see in each other the same wounded soul, the one punished for seeking truth, the one alienated for seeing more than they should. Their relationship doesn't end in a romantic resolution, but in mutual respect and emotional healing. Both characters walk away changed, not because they saved the world, but because they reached a place of emotional vulnerability with someone who truly understood them. Gabriel, portrayed with a mixture of ethereal detachment and passive-aggressive arrogance, undergoes perhaps the most surprising character arc. As the angelic emissary of heaven, Gabriel initially appears to be a morally superior figure, one who calmly informs Constantine that his attempts at redemption are futile. Yet, as the plot unfolds, Gabriel's true motivations are revealed to be deeply flawed. Believing that humanity only finds true goodness through suffering, Gabriel takes it upon herself to assist Mammon, the son of Lucifer, in breaching into the earthly plane. This betrayal is not born of hatred, but of a misguided belief in divine justice. Gabriel wants to force humanity into moral clarity by subjecting them to apocalyptic pain. Her fall from grace, culminating in her loss of wings and divine power, is a poetic unraveling. She is not punished for being evil, but for arrogantly assuming she knew better than God what humanity needed. Her final state, mortal, powerless, and humbled, serves as a cautionary note about the dangers of self-righteousness. Lucifer, though only appearing near the end of the film, delivers one of the most memorable and dynamic character portrayals. His arc is small but symbolically significant. Initially portrayed as a chaotic figure of indulgence and manipulation, he surprises viewers by demonstrating a form of twisted fairness. When Constantine sacrifices himself, Lucifer, expecting to claim his soul, is enraged to discover that this act of selflessness has earned Constantine redemption. In a moment of bitter irony and spiteful generosity, Lucifer heals Constantine's cancer to keep him alive, thus denying him entrance into heaven. This move, though seemingly petty, hints at Lucifer's nuanced complexity. He is not merely evil for evil's sake. He is a proud being who resents being outmaneuvered, even by grace. His arc, brief as it is, subverts expectations and leaves a lasting impression, cementing him as more than a caricature of villainy. Chaz Kramer's arc, though subtle, adds an important emotional dimension to the story. As Constantine's young apprentice and comic relief in earlier scenes, Chaz is often dismissed by Constantine and underestimated by others. Yet his loyalty is unwavering, and his curiosity pushes him deeper into Constantine's world. Chaz's death, while tragic, is symbolic of youthful sacrifice and unacknowledged bravery. In the final moments of his life, he assists Constantine in a critical ritual, showing maturity and courage far beyond his years. His unexpected demise underscores the cost of the spiritual war unfolding behind human perception. In a brief post-credits moment, Chaz reappears as an angelic figure, suggesting that his sacrifice did not go unnoticed. This quiet redemption adds a layer of spiritual symmetry to the story and reinforces the film's recurring theme, that faith, courage, and sacrifice are not always rewarded in life, but they are recognized in the cosmic order. The world of Constantine is built not just through its narrative or performances, but through its meticulous visual design. Its environments, textures, costumes, and spatial compositions all work together to immerse the viewer in a bleak, brooding universe where the supernatural bleeds into everyday life. The film's costume and set design serve a dual function: to ground the film in a realistic and contemporary Los Angeles, and to infuse every frame with a sense of mythic weight, spiritual decay, and otherworldly menace. This balancing act between grounded realism and stylized surrealism is essential to the film's atmosphere and emotional impact, and it allows the world of Constantine to feel both believable and symbolic. John Constantine's wardrobe is a study in intentional simplicity. Dressed in a white shirt, black tie, and a long, dark trench coat, his look is instantly recognizable and intentionally stripped of flashiness. This costume draws direct inspiration from noir detectives and exorcist figures alike, evoking comparisons to characters like Rick Deckard from Blade Runner and the Catholic clergy. The trench coat, in particular, becomes symbolic of Constantine's liminality. He is a man between worlds, caught in the crossfire between heaven and hell, belonging fully to neither. The coat also functions as a form of armor, not physical but psychological, offering him a barrier between himself and the horrors he encounters. The stark black and white color palette of his outfit mirrors his internal conflict between salvation and damnation, and while Constantine may believe the world operates in shades of gray, his costume reflects the absolutes he wrestles with every day. The details in Constantine's costume are subtle but impactful. His loosened tie, unbuttoned collar, and the ever-present cigarette are indicators of his disregard for social niceties and his physical and emotional exhaustion. These small touches give his appearance a lived-in quality, reinforcing his character as someone who has been doing this for far too long and no longer cares for appearances. Even his lighter and the worn look of his coat convey a man who carries the wear of his battles. The visual design of Constantine communicates who he is without needing dialogue: jaded, hardened, but still fighting. Angela Dotson's wardrobe is more understated, but equally revealing. As a homicide detective, she is mostly seen in practical clothing, blazers, dark slacks, and clean-cut blouses, highlighting her methodical, no-nonsense personality. Her look is professional, reserved, and non-expressive, which mirrors her inner repression. She is someone who has spent years burying her instincts, her faith, and her trauma under a facade of rationality. As the film progresses and she is pulled deeper into Constantine's world, her wardrobe softens only slightly, reflecting a subtle transformation rather than a dramatic one. The choice not to overtly feminize Angela, even during moments of vulnerability, shows a level of restraint and respect for her character's emotional complexity. The supernatural entities in the film, Gabriel, Lucifer, Mammon, and the half-breeds, benefit from more flamboyant and imaginative costume design. Gabriel, played by Tilda Swinton, is portrayed in androgynous, angelic attire that blurs gender and defies human expectations. Her costume includes elements of clerical garments and divine opulence, but in pale, ethereal tones that suggest both purity and emotional detachment. Gabriel's wings, which are only revealed during key scenes, are not bright or gleaming, but instead massive, shadowy, and intimidating. Her visual design underscores her role as an ambiguous figure, not fully aligned with either good or evil, and more concerned with divine logic than human compassion. Lucifer's costume is a brilliant subversion of expectations. Played by Peter Stormare, Lucifer appears barefoot in a white linen suit, a look that might traditionally signal cleanliness or innocence. However, this pure visual is tainted with dripping black tar on his feet and hands, symbolic of corruption bleeding through the surface. His white suit, almost clinical in appearance, contrasts with his manic, devilish behavior. The design makes a powerful statement. Evil does not always appear monstrous. Sometimes it wears the mask of cleanliness and order. This ironic inversion enhances the unsettling presence of Lucifer and hints at the deceptive nature of the forces Constantine must confront. Papa Midnight's wardrobe is rich in cultural and symbolic detail. His character draws from Afro-Caribbean and voodoo traditions, blended with the modern sophistication of a successful nightclub owner. Dressed in ornate robes, layered jewelry, and headpieces that reflect his spiritual authority, Midnight's appearance is a fusion of mysticism and worldliness. His club, a key set piece in the film, is equally well designed, functioning as a neutral ground where the sacred and profane coexist. The club's interior fuses ancient architecture, tribal iconography, and modern luxury, making it a visual metaphor for Midnight himself, a bridge between worlds, constantly negotiating the boundary between chaos and order. The set design of Constantine deserves particular recognition for how it crafts a Los Angeles that feels both familiar and haunted. The film doesn't rely on overt fantasy environments. Instead, it finds the uncanny in the ordinary. Alleys, rooftops, apartment buildings, and cathedrals are presented with a decayed, oppressive beauty. The color palette is muted, often soaked in shades of gray, green, and gold. These choices contribute to a sense of decay, spiritual fatigue, and lurking corruption beneath the surface of everyday life. The city is presented not as a place of glamour or opportunity, but as a spiritual battleground, a liminal zone where the veil between dimensions has grown thin. One of the film's most iconic sets is the representation of hell. Unlike traditional depictions filled with fire and demons, Constantine presents hell as a scorched mirror of earth, a ruined, blasted wasteland filled with storm winds, collapsing buildings, and flickering shadows. The design is both apocalyptic and eerily recognizable, suggesting that hell is not a separate dimension but a twisted echo of our own world. This setting speaks directly to the film's thematic focus on internal damnation. Hell is not somewhere you go, it's something that grows within. The sets were crafted using practical effects, CGI, and real-world locations overlaid with post-production elements, resulting in a terrifyingly tangible environment. Another notable location is the church where Constantine attempts to communicate with higher powers. The church set blends Catholic iconography with Gothic design, filled with flickering candles, high ceilings, and shadowy alcoves. It's a place of silence and solemnity, but also isolation and judgment. Unlike the warmth of a sanctuary, the church feels cold and indifferent, reflecting Constantine's complicated relationship with faith and his perception of God as a distant force. The screenplay of Constantine, 2005, is one of the most defining elements that shape the film's identity, tone, and lasting impact. While the story is adapted from the Hellblazer comic series, the film's script, written by Kevin Broadbent and Frank Capello, constructs its own unique narrative space that bridges supernatural horror, theological philosophy, more detective tropes, and existential introspection. The dialogue, in particular, balances exposition with thematic weight, often revealing as much about the characters' internal struggles as it does about the plot's metaphysical stakes. At the heart of the script is John Constantine himself, a character defined by his sharp tongue, biting cynicism, and deeply buried pain. His dialogue reflects this with lines that are often laced with sarcasm, bitterness, and dark humor. Unlike many action heroes who deliver bravado-filled one-liners, Constantine's words are usually reluctant, weary, and laced with a disdain for both the forces of good and evil. His tone is less of a savior and more of a reluctant participant, someone exhausted by the futility of his mission and the indifference of the higher powers he tries to appease. One of the strengths of the script is how it allows Constantine's voice to convey his duality. He is both deeply jaded and secretly hopeful, angry at God, yet desperate for redemption. Lines such as "God's just a kid with an ant farm" carry weight not only as memorable zingers, but as deep philosophical commentary. They reflect his crisis of faith and the bitterness of someone who has seen too much to believe in miracles, yet continues fighting because he wants to believe there's meaning to it all. His dialogue is shaped not just to entertain, but to expose his layers, a man broken by the world he tries to protect. Angela Dodson's dialogue contrasts with Constantine's in that it begins from a place of skepticism and professionalism. Her early interactions with Constantine are filled with resistance, suspicion, and emotional restraint. She speaks in clipped sentences, staying close to her role as a homicide detective. However, as she gets pulled deeper into the supernatural world, her dialogue evolves to show vulnerability, confusion, and, finally, faith. One of the more poignant aspects of her character arc is reflected in how she begins asking questions about herself, her sister, and the reality she once denied. Her linguistic journey from certainty to doubt, and then to belief, mirrors the film's overarching theme of confronting uncomfortable truths. A unique aspect of Constantine's scriptwriting is how it weaves exposition into character-driven dialogue. In a film so densely packed with spiritual lore, rules of celestial engagement, and metaphysical concepts, it could easily have collapsed under the weight of its own mythology. But the script mostly avoids clunky info dumps by embedding exposition into conversations that feel natural to the world and the stakes at hand. For example, when Constantine explains how half-breeds function in the human world or why he's damned despite fighting demons, the information is delivered with emotional context and personal frustration. These aren't lectures, they are confessions, debates, or outbursts rooted in character. The dialogue between Constantine and Gabriel is especially layered. Their exchanges are not simply good versus evil confrontations, but ideological sparring matches. Gabriel speaks in calm, deliberate language, often with a chilling detachment, representing the cold order of divine justice. In contrast, Constantine's responses are emotionally charged, laced with defiance, mockery, and pain. Their conversation in the church and later during the climax encapsulates one of the film's deepest conflicts: divine indifference versus human suffering. Gabriel's line, "You're going to die because you've smoked 30 cigarettes a day since you were 15, and you're going to go to hell because of the life you took," reveals the brutal fairness of celestial law, and Constantine's response, more in action than words, speaks to the human instinct to resist that fate even when undeserved. One of the most striking pieces of dialogue comes near the film's climax, when Constantine chooses to sacrifice himself by slitting his wrists to save Angela from Mammon. As he lies bleeding, he begins a prayer not for himself, but for her. The speech is subtle and not overly dramatized, yet its sincerity breaks through the sardonic mask Constantine has worn for the entire film. The scene's power lies in the restraint of the script. Rather than delivering a grand monologue, the words are simple, vulnerable, and offered in silence as Lucifer descends. It is this moment, and the understated way it is written, that reveals Constantine's true nature, a man capable of selflessness in the end, even when he knows no one may be watching. Peter Stormare's Lucifer, though only appearing in the final act, is given some of the film's most memorable lines. His dialogue is playful, malevolent, and chillingly charismatic. His speech patterns are rhythmic and seductive, laced with mockery and gleeful spite. "I don't have to lie, John. That's the great thing about the truth. Everyone knows it already," is one such line that lingers long after the scene ends. His lines feel improvised yet precise, as if each word is calculated to unnerve. The script gives Lucifer just enough screen time and dialogue to make an unforgettable impact, proving that quality of writing can outweigh quantity of scenes. The script also includes moments of deadpan humor and dry wit, which serve as relief valves from the film's dense atmosphere. Constantine's sarcastic remarks, especially when dealing with demons or celestial bureaucrats, offer brief glimpses of levity that keep the tone from becoming unbearably grim. However, these moments are carefully balanced. They do not undercut the drama, but instead reflect Constantine's coping mechanisms and layered personality. The humor is character-driven, not situational, and often doubles as philosophical commentary. Structurally, the script is tightly woven. The pacing of the dialogue aligns with the narrative beats, accelerating during action sequences and slowing down during moments of introspection. Conversations are not wasted on filler. Even side characters like Beeman, Chaz, and Midnight are given dialogue that feels textured and purposeful. Beeman's nerdy, enthusiastic explanations of supernatural tools, Chaz's earnest admiration for Constantine, and Midnight's measured declarations all add to the world building. Each character speaks in a distinct voice, shaped by their role in the story and their place in the spiritual hierarchy. Another strength of the script is its use of silence and visual language to complement the spoken word. At times, what's not said becomes just as important as what is. The spaces between words, the pauses, the glances, the deliberate hesitations, are written into the rhythm of the film. Constantine and Angela's evolving relationship, for instance, is marked by their mutual restraint. The script does not force romantic dialogue between them, choosing instead to express their connection through shared trauma, trust, and quiet moments of understanding. This restraint gives their bond authenticity and prevents it from feeling contrived or obligatory. The marketing and promotional campaign for Constantine, 2005, was as distinctive and thematically aligned as the film itself. Tasked with selling a movie that defied typical genre classification, blending supernatural horror, theological drama, and comic book action, the studio faced a unique challenge. The film wasn't a traditional superhero blockbuster, nor was it a straightforward horror entry. Instead, Warner Brothers and its marketing partners crafted a multi-pronged promotional strategy that relied on striking visuals, star power, and a carefully cultivated atmosphere of mystery and darkness to draw in audiences across various demographic segments. One of the most immediate tools in the promotional arsenal was the casting of Keanu Reeves. By 2005, Reeves was still riding high on the residual success of the Matrix trilogy, and his name carried significant weight, particularly among genre fans and action audiences. The trailers and posters prominently featured his image, often in stylized silhouettes or moody lighting that emphasized the noir tone of the film. Promotional materials leaned heavily into the image of Reeves as John Constantine, a darkly dressed, weary-eyed antihero standing alone against the forces of heaven and hell. The marketing team used his celebrity as a reliable anchor, even though his portrayal of Constantine differed in ethnicity, accent, and attitude from the comic book source. The official trailers and TV spots for Constantine were moody, atmospheric, and deliberately paced, emphasizing the film's spiritual and apocalyptic themes rather than its comic book origins. Voiceover narration in some versions introduced Constantine as a man who's been to hell and back, setting the stage for a spiritual conflict rather than a traditional battle of good versus evil. The trailers highlighted key visual moments: Constantine confronting demons, Angela being pulled into hell, and the surreal depiction of a burning, desolate Los Angeles. These visuals were paired with ominous music and flashes of dialogue that hinted at the film's larger metaphysical stakes, such as Constantine's declaration, "I'm not here for you." This cryptic line, used in early teasers, became one of the film's signature marketing quotes. Interestingly, the marketing steered clear of overtly referencing the Hellblazer comic series from DC's Vertigo imprint. While the film was indeed based on those comics, Warner Brothers made a conscious decision to promote Constantine as a standalone supernatural thriller rather than a direct comic adaptation. This was partially due to the limited mainstream recognition of the Hellblazer series at the time, especially compared to higher-profile properties like Batman or Spider-Man. The omission allowed the studio to market the film more freely to fans of horror, fantasy, and noir cinema rather than confining it to the comic book niche. Nonetheless, comic fans were not entirely left out. Marketing partnerships included special features in comic magazines, online forums, and early fan sites. Advanced screenings were held in select cities for comic and horror fans, generating early buzz. These screenings often included giveaways, such as Constantine-themed lighters, posters, or tarot-style cards, meant to deepen engagement with the film's occult atmosphere. Though the film's divergence from comic canon created some backlash among purists, the promotional strategy succeeded in piquing curiosity among a wider audience unfamiliar with the source material. International promotion for Constantine also leaned heavily on its mysticism and dark fantasy elements, which often resonate strongly in global markets. In regions like Japan, Korea, and parts of Europe, marketing campaigns focused more on the philosophical underpinnings and the battle between light and dark, often using translated slogans like "Between heaven and hell lies our only hope" to frame Constantine as a cosmic intermediary. These efforts were supported by international press tours, where Keanu Reeves and other cast members attended premieres and media events. Online marketing played a key role in Constantine's promotional push, especially considering the early 2000s were a transitional era for digital engagement. The film's official website featured interactive elements, such as games, downloadable wallpapers, character bios, and themed tarot readings that allowed users to explore the world of Constantine. This level of interactivity helped create immersion, especially for younger, tech-savvy audiences beginning to use the internet as a primary source of movie discovery. The website also hosted early trailers, behind-the-scenes featurettes, and interviews with the cast and crew, providing insight into the film's mythology and production process. In addition to traditional trailers and web campaigns, the studio released a number of promotional tie-ins that added to the film's visibility. A prequel comic book titled John Constantine, Hellblazer, All His Engines was released by DC/Vertigo in January 2005, just before the movie's debut. Though not a direct adaptation, this comic was timed to introduce new readers to Constantine's world and tone, offering a taste of the dark, morally ambiguous universe that the film would echo. Soundtrack promotion also played a supporting role in the campaign. Warner Brothers released the Constantine soundtrack around the film's launch, which featured an original score by Brian Tyler and Klaus Badelt, as well as several tracks by artists aligned with the movie's tone. While the score itself wasn't promoted as heavily as in some blockbuster films, select scenes were teased alongside musical previews, particularly during TV and internet ads. Music-centric promotions were also hosted on radio stations in major cities, offering ticket giveaways and branded merchandise as part of call-in contests and themed horror movie marathons. Print advertising played a more traditional role, with striking one-page and two-page spreads appearing in magazines like Entertainment Weekly, Fangoria, and Empire. These ads featured moody artwork of Constantine walking through shadowy streets, or close-up shots of angels and demons locked in eerie confrontation. The poster campaign included several variations. Some showed Constantine standing with his iconic cross-shaped shotgun, others emphasized religious imagery such as crucifixes and rosaries, and one popular version depicted the half-human, half-demonic silhouettes that evoked the film's central theme of spiritual duality. The tagline, "Hell wants him, heaven won't take him, earth needs him," became the film's most iconic marketing phrase, encapsulating Constantine's outsider status and his reluctant heroism. This tagline appeared across all formats, from posters to online banners to TV trailers, and quickly became associated with the film's brand. It helped frame the narrative as a high-stakes cosmic drama and positioned Constantine not as a savior but as a necessary, flawed instrument in a broken system. When Constantine was released in 2005, it entered a cinematic landscape already shaped by both conventional superhero films and darker supernatural thrillers. To fully appreciate the uniqueness of Constantine, it is important to compare the film to both earlier adaptations of similar material, other genre contemporaries, and the works of its director and lead actor. This comparative lens highlights what Constantine accomplished, where it deviated from expectations, and how it fits within the broader evolution of comic book and occult storytelling in film. At its core, Constantine is a loose adaptation of the DC/Vertigo comic series Hellblazer, which first introduced John Constantine in the early 1980s. The comic was renowned for its gritty realism, British political satire, social commentary, and complex depiction of the occult. Unlike the bleach blonde, Liverpudlian Constantine of the comics, the film presents a darker-haired, American version played by Keanu Reeves, who trades the streetwise cynicism of the comics for a quieter, more brooding demeanor. This creative decision drew initial criticism from fans of the source material, but it also opened the door for the film to reimagine the character through a different cultural lens. Comparing the film to the original comics reveals clear tonal and stylistic divergences. Hellblazer leaned into the personal consequences of Constantine's choices, portraying him as a con man and trickster as much as a hero. The film, while retaining elements of Constantine's tortured past and moral ambiguity, casts him more overtly as a reluctant savior figure. His interactions with celestial beings, demons, and the divine are framed more as moral dilemmas than political ones, reflecting the film's preference for mythic storytelling over gritty realism. The film also abandons the comic's heavy British influence in favor of a distinctly American setting, specifically a noir-tinted Los Angeles that replaces the comic's dingy streets of London. In this way, Constantine invites comparison with other urban supernatural films that reframe ancient themes within modern settings. Films like The Ninth Gate, 1999, End of Days, 1999, and the Prophecy series tread similar ground, exploring eschatology, demonic bargains, and the thin veil between earth and hell. Like Constantine, these films use religious iconography and metaphysical questions as narrative engines. However, Constantine stands apart in its highly stylized approach, both visually and thematically, and its commitment to ambiguity. While End of Days and The Prophecy often resolve their narratives with a clear triumph of good over evil, Constantine leaves the cosmic balance unsettled, reflecting a more existential worldview. In the context of comic book adaptations specifically, Constantine deviated sharply from its contemporaries. In the early 2000s, superhero films were dominated by the likes of Spider-Man, 2002, X-Men, 2000, and Batman Begins, 2005. These films emphasized heroism, personal responsibility, and, typically, a redemptive arc within a familiar good versus evil framework. Constantine, by contrast, presented a protagonist who openly rejects both heaven and hell, operates in moral limbo, and expresses skepticism toward divine justice. It was a far cry from the colorful optimism of Spider-Man or the structured discipline of Batman, and instead resembled a theological noir, closer in tone to Blade Runner than to any superhero film of its time. Compared to Blade, 1998, and its sequels, another dark comic adaptation that blended horror, action, and a reluctant antihero, Constantine offers a more philosophical take. Both protagonists fight monsters, both smoke through their existential pain, and both inhabit underground worlds ruled by secret hierarchies. But where Blade focuses on physical conflict and vampiric politics, Constantine explores metaphysical manipulation and the politics of salvation. The enemies in Constantine aren't just demons, they're representatives of divine systems, often as corrupt or indifferent as the hellspawn they oppose. Director Francis Lawrence, who made his feature debut with Constantine, later went on to direct several installments in the Hunger Games series. His work there shows some continuity with Constantine, especially in his use of bleak environments, stylized violence, and strong visual symbolism. However, the Hunger Games franchise operates on a more literal political level, with rebellion against oppressive human institutions rather than metaphysical forces. What Lawrence brought to Constantine, and which distinguishes it from other adaptations of the era, is a consistent mood of atmospheric dread paired with spiritual questioning. That sensibility would echo, albeit in different form, in his later science fiction and fantasy projects. Keanu Reeves' performance as Constantine can be compared to his roles in the Matrix trilogy and later in John Wick. All three characters are introspective men of action, battling larger systems that seek to control or exploit them. Yet, each portrays a different kind of struggle. Neo's fight is against simulated reality and systemic oppression, while John Wick's is driven by personal loss and underworld retribution. Constantine's war is arguably the most abstract. He is a soul trying to escape eternal damnation in a universe where rules are unclear and divine intention is opaque. In this way, Constantine might be considered Reeves' most spiritually fraught role. Unlike Neo or Wick, Constantine does not seek justice or vengeance, but peace, redemption, and perhaps an end to suffering. When viewed in comparison to television adaptations, most notably the 2014 NBC series Constantine starring Matt Ryan, the 2005 film again presents an alternate version of the character and his world. Ryan's Constantine is more faithful to the comic books, sarcastic, British, and steeped in low-level magic and streetwise maneuvering. The TV version leans into horror episodics and creature-of-the-week formats, with a more intimate and serialized narrative. In contrast, the film version is more cinematic in its scope, less concerned with the mechanics of spells and rituals, and more with the broader cosmic war between heaven and hell. The television Constantine feels like a grifter magician walking the edge of madness. The film Constantine feels like a damned soul walking toward inevitability. One notable contrast also lies in the pacing and structure of the narrative. Many contemporary comic films of the early 2000s adhered to the three-act hero's journey template. While Constantine contains elements of that structure, introduction, escalation, confrontation, it subverts the typical third-act resolution. Rather than a triumphant battle or public vindication, Constantine's climax is a quiet act of self-sacrifice, one that earns not fanfare but reluctant divine mercy. This reversal of typical genre expectations sets the film apart not only from superhero movies but also from most action and horror films of its time.